Thank you again, Dylan. Hello, everybody. As you just heard, my name is Stephen Quick, and I did my thesis research on the impact of forest thinning on surface soil carbon in a second growth temperate rainforest in Southwest Washington. I conducted my research, as I just said, in Southwest Washington with my advisor, Dr. Dylan Fisher, and senior forest ecologist at the Nature Conservancy, Dr. Michael Case. In this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit, I might go a little fast. I'm going to offer some background about the forestry methods used on our site before getting into my results. So let's get into it. All right, so I learned a lot about forest ecology and forestry science on this project, but I was originally fascinated by this management concept that we can unlock growth potential stored in these densely stocked forests, like the trees you see in the picture on the left. The idea, or in other words, if we cut some of these trees down, if we thin them, then the remaining individuals will rapidly grow and converge on the qualities of the sparse forest on the right. And the trajectory or the pathway to recovery for a disturbed forest almost inevitably includes this overstocked condition. And it's called the stem exclusion phase of forest development, because the trees that lack the structural integrity to grow tall will simply fall over because they can't compete for light and they exclude themselves from the system. And so to me, this begged the question, can we accelerate this process? Can we accelerate the trajectory of recovery just by removing those unhealthy individuals that would have fallen anyways? But management isn't harmless, right? Even when trees are allowed to regrow. Northwest forests are among the most carbon-dense forests in the world and are incredibly resistant to change, especially when we're talking about one-off disturbances. However, frequent harvests result in large losses of carbon through decomposition of organic material like stumps and litter, and even the wood products that the timber harvested is used to produce. In these figures from Harmon et al. In 1990, published in Science in 1990, I'm showing percentage of old growth carbon on the y-axis and time since disturbance on the x-axis. And these figures show the effect of a single disturbance on the left, like a harvest or a fire. And in that system, it recovers its pre-treatment carbon levels in about 100 years. And we're comparing that to the system on the right, which experiences multiple frequent disturbances, and it never recovers its pre-treatment carbon levels. But in both cases, management is unavoidably associated with carbon losses. But these models represented systems that were designed for commercial production. And so the effects of management when carbon sequestration was the primary goal remained unclear. So my objective here was to determine if it's possible to restore old growth forest structure with light touch restoration thinning treatments while maximizing forest carbon and capture through time. My study took place in Southwest Washington at the Ellsworth Creek Preserve, which is managed by the Nature Conservancy. The site consists of multiple basins, which were in a variety of post-harvest and development stages when TNC acquired the property. Shortly thereafter, between 2005 and 2006, they installed a monitoring network to survey forest and stream habitats with 28 plots in each of 8 sub-basins, which are pictured in the map on the left. And that's for a total of 224 plots. And those plots were measured in 2007, and then 60 of them were remeasured in 2020, and I'll be using that data in today's talk. The site was formerly industrial timberland with roads still intact. The 2 passive sub-basins were shown in yellow, and they were left as is and monitored as controls, but I didn't include those areas in this study. Appropriate roads were improved and maintained in the active and control sub-basins, but treatments were only applied in active sub-basins. Treatments occurred between 2009 and 2013 and took the form of variable density thinning in mature stands, which targeted small and unhealthy trees. For all treatment areas, though, late cereal species were preferred to be left on site, and so that's western red cedar and western hemlock. Skips were used to protect critical habitat, gaps were intentionally kept small, and anything cut in a stand less than 30 years old was left on site to feed back into the soil. Soil sampling took place in 2020 and 2022. Measurements were made in 4 subplots for each quarter-acre sample plot. In 2022, I collected organic layer soil samples. I measured forest litter depth in the field, mass of the organic matter using loss on ignition methods, and total carbon and nitrogen using a PerkinElmer 2400 CHN analyzer. I compared both tree carbon estimates and soil organic matter among treatments using both direct and modeled estimates of stand carbon. And my comparisons are with both 2007 and 2020 field data and model estimates. Specifically for each response variable, I used a nested Remel model with sample plot nested within stand and both stand and sample plot as random effects. Fixed effects were treatment, stand age, and their interaction. To model forest carbon through time, I used the Forest Vegetation Simulator, or FVS. Very briefly, FVS models tree growth and yield based on region-specific empirical relationships with a tree inventory database as input. So I go out there, I take a bunch of measurements of a small patch of trees, I give it to the software, and it gives me a statistically representative model of a forest. And those models can return density and mortality figures, as well as metrics for pathogens and insects and fire. The software's ability to model carbon is based on common allometric equation approaches in carbon science, and the approach is widely used by scientists across the nation. So I used the software to run 2 sets of models. First, I built a model that represents reality using the 2007 plot inventory data, and then I validated those outputs using data from 2020. And then in the second model, I create a forecast model for over the course of 100 years using the 2020 data. Second model, forecast model, 100 years, 2020 data. All right, getting into the results now, there's a lot to unpack in this graph. So in each panel, I'm showing a model of reality from, like I said, 2007 to 2020, and that's the short solid line. I'm also showing the forecast model out to 2107, which is the long dotted line, and the direct measurements collected by either TNC in 2020 or by myself in 2022, and those are the black dots. So going from top to bottom, we have trees per hectare declining as a result of the thinning treatments. And then basal area, the second graph down, increasing, showing an increase in the average size of the trees, which is what we expected. And thus a similar increase in total stand carbon and the total above ground carbon. Total stand carbon and above ground carbon are also increasing, but there is a significant lag in stand carbon for treated stands, which can be observed in the difference in the slope between the 2 solid lines. But the big takeaways here are that my measurements showed nice agreement with both models, where the black dots are kind of within the range of the model outputs. And the 2 treatment groups end the simulation with similar carbon storage north of 600 megagrams per hectare, but simulated trees are slightly larger in treated stands after 100 years. Now let's look at these comparisons just in the short term. So a more detailed comparison of active and controlled treatment groups using models developed for the first 50 years suggests similar trends. However, the differences between treatment groups for total stand carbon and above ground carbon were not statistically significant for most years. These models help confirm TNC's overall hypothesis that we can, in fact, accelerate old growth forest condition recovery without significantly impacting overall stand carbon. In the bottom 2 graphs, trees per hectare is much lower for most active stands, yet quadratic mean diameter is more similar in the graph directly to the right. And the result there is that large trees, which store more carbon per tree, are dominating the effect on stand carbon I lost my spot. They dominate the treatment impact on stand carbon and basal area. Additionally, it appears that through time, differences in stand carbon between treatments diminishes, such that over the next few years, the 2 stands will very likely be generating the same amount or capturing the same amount of carbon. These figures compare soil carbon variables using my measurements from winter in 2022, approximately 12 years after treatments were applied. The upper right panel reflects modeled data, but all of the other panels are my direct measurements of the soil. And surprisingly, I found no difference in soil percent carbon or soil bulk density after 12 years following measurement. In fact, several active management stands in higher Several active management stands had higher forest floor carbon than controls, which may seem counterintuitive based on the idea that active management results in conditions that should be more favorable to decomposition of organic matter, resulting in lower carbon over time. However, I also expected lower surface soil carbon immediately after treatments because logging-associated disturbance can initially result in reduced organic matter delivered to the forest floor, resulting in temporary decreases in forest floor carbon. When I considered stand age in the model, I found that active stands were younger in age on average, and thus may have still had elevated forest floor organic matter associated with the last major logging disturbance. In fact, the general curve of the forest floor versus stand age in the upper left panel is reflective of theoretical patterns of organic matter decomposition post-harvest, also known as the Covington curve. And upon deeper investigation, it was apparent that forest floor carbon was elevated in the young treated stands in the top right panel, but not significantly different in the mature stands in the bottom left panel. So my results suggest that there are not clear carbon consequences to active management in these basins, and models may converge in the long run. Generally, many managed stands had reduced carbon, but that gap will likely close in the next 50 years, according to these models. Stand level data indeed suggests that average stand carbon may be similar between treatment groups, and treated stands may result in higher carbon storage in larger diameter trees. Interestingly, soil organic matter data suggested that while forest floor carbon should be directly measured, there was no significant effect of treatments on forest floor carbon in stands that I measured. Instead, forest floor carbon may actually vary more predictably with stand age regardless of treatment. More investigation is needed to evaluate the long-term relationships between restoration, forest thinning, and carbon dynamics, which may benefit from a more mechanistic carbon modeling approach. Especially with regard to forest soils. But this research highlights the trade-offs of restoration goals for carbon sequestration in the near term, but suggests modeling is robust and future carbon storage may be maintained on average in restored forest stands. And that's it.